It's time for us to go ahead and start our Filler Up conference call for the Alert Program and Back to School. I'm Sherry Shellenberger, and I'm excited today to be again joined by my wonderful colleague, Carla Cay Williams.
Hi, everybody.
And what we're going to do, many of you have had the pleasure of hearing Carla Cay speak before in person, so we're fortunate to have her joining us here. She also does our one-day trainings, our international courses, and if you've had that pleasure, you'll know what a pleasure it is. She's an expert on sensory processing, sensory issues, and international speaker, and we sure appreciate her joining me again. This is our fourth call together, and I am just having so much fun, so thanks a bunch. If you missed any of our other calls, you may want to take a listen or check them out. We have them recorded on the website, and Carla and I were remarking after the last one, we're surprising ourselves about how much we can try to jam into a half hour. So talking, not our problem, Carla.
No,
Fitting it in, that's a whole nother thing. And so to set the tone literally here today, we have kind of a fun little song clip that we'll start with. So I'm going to ask my tech folks to hit it here. So that was the song. You probably date yourself if you know that song. It's called School Days. It was written by Cobb and Edwards in 1907. So I think our school days now are just a little different than those ones. It's some fun music that's in public domain, which is why we're able to kind of play it here. So I hope you could actually hear it and recognize it. If not, you had a little break right when we started. So our goals, again, in our 30 minutes are the same as our other calls, where we're going to try to build on information that many of you already have, kind of emphasizing two general themes. And the first one is keeping it simple. Sometimes we try to take on too much or do too much or try to implement too many things at a time, and then it just kind of gets us overwhelmed, gets to be too much, literally. So taking it simple, keeping it simple and taking it easy. And then always with the emphasis on setting up our clients and our family members for success. I know that's a huge belief of Mary Sue, of Carla Cay, and me in our work with the Alert Program here over the decades, I am sad to say at this point. So anyway, that's kind of the scoop. It's exciting to me when I was thinking of the topic, too, because we've really built, if you've been on the other calls, I know a couple of you have been joining us here consistently, so that's fun. We went through morning routines, bedtime routines, transitions, and now this back to school time. So it's really a perfect setup for what is, I think, for lots of families, kind of that ultimate transition of getting out of summer routines and back into the school kind of routine. And then just a reminder that if you are, as I go along, I'm going to say some different websites or blogs that you may find helpful, interesting, some books, things like that, and some music. We'll send you in the post-conference call the list of those resources so that you have those that you could cut and paste and search for the things that you would find helpful maybe or want to check out for yourself. So you'll get that email document. So we'll start off with we're going to start off kind of covering some general suggestions, go over some classroom routines and some communication suggestions, and then we'll get into some of the specific self-regulation strategies. I know we have lots of very experienced folks on the call, so we want to kind of dive into some of those, but really a lot of setup seems to be the important thing. So I wanted to start with a quote, and we'll send you the link to this article that's online, and they talked about kindergartners who had a high level of self-regulation in the fall did much better on tests for reading, for vocabulary, and for math in the spring when they were compared with children who were rated as having low levels of self-regulation. So I feel like in general, educators are really starting to pay attention, and that's kind of a pun here, and I meant it, to the whole topic of self-regulation. We may be defining it a little differently, but that's a topic for another time. But at least the awareness is kind of there.
So when we have kids that have a diagnosis already, like especially our attention deficit kids, what we tend to know about them is they love novelty. So the beginning of school is great. They go to school, it's gangbusters,
Yes.
they are having a great time. And then the third and fourth and fifth week comes along, and now the novelty's worn off. And sometimes that's when parents and teachers will say, okay, the honeymoon's over.
Yeah.
They know what's going on.
Or
and
in their
so,
case, maybe the woohoo phase is over.
Exactly. So during that time where they're really doing well, that's a great time to make sure there's lots of sensory motor supports in place so that when those first few weeks were off, all is good. And so just like our kids with ADD who need novelty, then we have our kids who may be on the spectrum or maybe a little bit more sensory defensive, and they need things to be a lot more the same. They need things to stay routine, and they need things to be comfortable and safe. And so some of the strategies and suggestions we're going to be talking about are how to start setting up way ahead of time so that the routine doesn't feel like it's making that big of a change when school starts. And so we'll be visiting the days before school starts. One of the things that tends to work really good for kids of all different ages is talking about things before school starts. And social stories, Carol Gray's social stories are a great way to start talking about kids with those things before school even starts.
And I think, too, sometimes we think, oh, my kid isn't verbal yet, so I'm not going to do some of that. But we don't always know how much receptively a lot of our kiddos are getting. So I think it can't hurt to talk ourselves. Maybe we're just talking ourselves through our own social story.
It's good to be set up ourselves.
There we go. It doesn't hurt. I had a colleague of mine in Wisconsin was telling me a wonderful story about a friend of a little guy with on the autism spectrum, and his friend went ahead and made him a short video that he could play on his smartphone of what he could expect when he was going to go back to school. So the video had the student saying goodbye to his mother. They had getting on a bus. They literally went to the bus thing, and this was this child's project to make for his friend. And so went in the video, we're going to get on a bus. We're going to be greeted when we get off the bus by some school people. This is what your classroom is going to look like. This is what it looks like to walk to your classroom. This is where you're maybe putting your backpack when you get in your class. All these details in a very short video. I'm talking about maybe it was a total of 2.5 minute long video. And it was a video that could be played on a smartphone. So what was really fabulous about this is the friend did this as his project, gave it to our little guy that's on the spectrum, and that little guy played it tons of times before school started. And then they said, first day of school, he just easily and effortlessly said, goodbye, Mom, got on his bus, greeted the school staff, did the thing, walked in just kind of strutting his stuff, knowing what was coming. And I thought, what a really sweet example of using some nice technology and then using community to help us to kind of get in the groove and know what was great. So it's just a kind of a cool story all the way around. I think practicing bedtime and waking routines days, or really for a lot of our folks, sometimes weeks before, it really helps us to get emotionally and mentally prepared. It helps them to get emotionally and mentally prepared and not have that sudden shift of a routine change because we're already having so many changes anyway. So kind of getting our biorhythms going, getting our sensory motor systems kind of on that right schedule, all is going to help a lot. And then I know many of you already know this, or in your practices, and certainly your parents, but using a lot of very intense sensory motor strategies right before and right after school routine, because our kiddos are hanging on in school. They may not get the intensity of the strategies, and we all know this. School is not, winter wipeout or summer wipeout. It is, and the big clinic pieces of equipment and all the good intensity that we get when we go to our therapies. And so when we have those possibilities at home and using them right before and right after school, going to make a nice difference in terms of setting ourselves up for some success, or as much success as we could. So just simple things, backyard play, playgrounds, going to a pool before and after, all of those things that many of you are already suggesting and knowing. This is a great time to be looking at plugging them into the schedules.
Another thing that we really like to think about with some of our kids is how hard it is for them to make and keep friends. And that whole thing about going back to school can be pretty scary too. So if there's any way that you have kids from the neighborhood that you know will be going to that school, or once they start school even, getting play dates set up with classmates that you know could be a good match for your your kiddo, and just helping them outside of the school day to make friends with kids in their class so that they feel like they have another connection with the classroom, and even things like circle of friends in and out of school. As long as kids are having trouble with the social stuff, anything that parents can do before the school year starts and the beginning of the school year to create some of those friendships and support them will be really helpful.
And so obviously, like we can't do that now. For many of us, it's a little too late to do for over our summertime. But like Carla said, just those first couple weeks, really important and really good, searching out and looking for those folks that would be open and friendly and supportive to having some of that happen. That again, that's that thing. It's so hard for our kiddos. Things that naturally are even a challenge for our neurotypically developing kiddos, even more of a challenge for some of our kiddos. So any support we can give them, really good. There are a lot of nice children's books out there that we could read to our kiddos about going back to the school, or what's going to happen at school, or what things might be like, some things like that we really want to go ahead and plug in. And then, so those are kind of some of our before prep kind of ideas. Let's move into some classroom routines and some communication ideas, because I think this is the area that starts to cause the stress and blood pressure for lots of us as family members, as parents, the kind of knowing that it can be a hard time, and how do we go about it, and we're going to get a new teacher, and is it going to be okay, and all those really hard, stressful things. So just acknowledging that they're stressful and hard, and then what do we do about it? So as parents, I think it's so helpful, or family members, to let the teachers know that we know that our individuals have some challenges, but here's some things that we've found that are worth the time or effort to do, and letting them know. I may be too positive here. I may be a little Pollyanna. I hope not, but I really think it's changed a lot, that we've had a really nice shift, that our teachers really can appreciate a lot of times some of the tips that we have for them, and that the school staff in general, I've hopefully, it's true for you too, but I have found to be much more welcoming of a lot of information, I think. And then when we have to have conversations with teachers before school starts, or after the child's been in school a little bit, you talked about this, Carla, like that different teachers want different things depending on what's a match for them. Some of our teachers don't want to kind of get a preconceived notion. They want to kind of dive in, see how the kiddo does in the way they do their class, and then if there's problems after that, okay, I'll go ahead and I'll get with you, and we'll make some changes or make some adaptations or be flexible or whatever. So we'll send you a little link about, it's a sweet printable sheet and handout called Back to School Sensory Prepared, that's on understandingspd.com website. So we'll send that one off to you.
Some families like to help the child to make a me book.
I love this idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of me book, like little templates on autism websites, but they could, again, be for anybody, where the child can introduce themselves, they can draw pictures, they can say what they like, they can say what works for them, they can say what their interests are, and it's a great way to introduce specific sensory motor strategies that you may have already found work for your kiddo, and they can tell their teacher in their words what kind of works for them.
Nice.
It's a different way to communicate by just sharing information that's available. And so sometimes we even have to think as parents, and boy, as therapists too, we have to often go in and share information with teachers, and approaching it from the direction of, I'm here to support you, I'm here to help you in whatever way will make it easier for all the kids in your class, instead of, I got this kiddo and you have to do this or it's not going to work for you. So just kind of thinking about your approach could be a different thing to look at too. Then another thing you might want to think about is, if you already have an IEP, or even if you don't have an IEP, is there someone at the school that you have a relationship with that you can draw on for support, for brainstorming, for ways to communicate, for what's the best way to share information? Having a connection at the school, maybe someone not even in the classroom, may also be something that you might be able to do.
And I know here in New Mexico, and I'll just kind of speak from this, which is hard for lots of our families, is sometimes they don't even know what class or teacher they're going to be assigned to until right up to the day of school. So if you can get in tight with somebody in the school or know somebody in the PTA. I'm not trying to sound subversive here, but really if there's a way to explain to people, it would really help my kiddo to be able to know a little more than we know, and see if there's somebody in that system, connected with the teachers or the principals or the special education folks that can kind of get you some of that information a little earlier. I'd say go for it, because I find it to be quite daunting, and even for our typical kids, it's kind of dicey. I watch, other little people in my life and notice that they get to school and they go, oh man, I just got my schedule, I just got my teacher, I don't have lunch with any of my friends, and all the stuff that goes with doing school that then of course gets magnified and harder for some of our kiddos that we're thinking about while we're on the call here. And then the communication back and forth. This is always a tough thing. And if you have or are working with or live with a kiddo that is not verbal or can't organize the thoughts, so maybe they got a lot of words, but they can't tell you what you do at school today, it's really tricky. So finding those ways, we have, the old-fashioned paper way where notebooks or little logs go back and forth to kind of indicate some of the things that happened in the day, and just asking teachers how they're managing a lot of that, because more and more a lot's being done electronically through email, and but just finding some way. I really want to honor and say that I felt this in my family with my brother, who many of you know I have a brother who has Down syndrome, and he'd go to school and he'd come home and we'd all be like, wonder what happened today. We got pictures in here, we got stuff, but we don't really know what went on. And so it's not in, I really want to say again to the therapists and teachers, this is not the parents trying to micromanage. A lot of times they really have no clue what has happened, and we've had a whole day full of good stuff and we know what's gone on. So just kind of consider that. And then I know many of you are already doing this, but for parents and teachers, you can talk engines even if your child can't. So if that gives you extra vocabulary to go ahead and have a way to describe some of what went on, or what were some better times of the day, or how things went, that can be really helpful. We all know that if we've had a rough morning at home and we send a kiddo off, a way to tell the staff that, so that if things start falling apart earlier in the day than usual, they're not going, what the heck did we do? We know that there has been some struggles, and that in a way we're not in the best place that we could be, and that way nobody's taking it personally. We're getting out of that kind of trap of getting too caught up in their stuff and noticing what we can do to be supportive rather than getting into any kind of blame game thing. I think that's really, really huge. And we got to kind of take that baseline assumption everybody's doing the best they can, and then dig in from there, hopefully. And one of the websites that we'll share for you from North Shore Pediatrics talk about that. They say, establish a frequent communication system between parents and teachers. Now, the goal of this is not to bombard teachers with constant emails and phone calls, but to be able to have constant communication so all parties can help to support parents, teachers alike. So really kind of remembering that and kind of dialing ourselves back when we get into our intensity about things.
And sometimes that's a little bit harder when kids get into secondary school, but I think it's just really
so many
important.
Teachers.
Yeah. And there is the good news about being in secondary education is that there is usually an agenda or some way that kids are tracking assignments. And so if there's a way that you can use the agenda that they're tracking their assignments in to also just track and get more information about what happened in the day, and that the kid can even write down things in the book, that could also be a great way to communicate back and forth.
Because we know many of you have been there on the middle school homework time, and what was the assignment? Well, we don't exactly know, or we think it might have been this. We think it might be due in a month. We're not really clear on that, or, well, so-and-so said we don't even have to do it, or whatever the issues can be. So that's a dicey one. The other thing I'm going to include for you in our resource sheet that you'll get after the call is our American Occupational Therapy Association, AOTA. I'm going to brag on them a little bit. They have some wonderful one-page PDFs that you can print and take a look at with very general but very lovely suggestions. I think sometimes, too, as parents or therapists, it holds a little more credence when it's on kind of a nice letterhead and formatted other than just my therapist said this or whatever. They have ones on homework tips, occupational therapy tips for homework success. Wow, that is not easy for me to say. Occupational therapy tips for health and success in school. And then there's a nice Pinterest board that I wanted to include from the Understand SPD people with some ideas of school supply kind of things. So again, when we have our kiddos needing some extra things, can we send some of those things in with our kid and say, check with the teacher first, obviously, but say this one we know has a track record of success, so let's try this or whatever. I think just knowing that they have that support's good. We're going to go ahead and talk some very specific strategies. Those of you familiar with the ALERT program obviously know we talk about the 5 different ways of changing our engines of mouth, move, touch, look, and listen. So just kind of know that we'll rip through a couple of those categories, give a few suggestions, and then we have a question at the end that we want to try to get to here and answer. So in the mouth category, this was fun. I was actually at a high school class just yesterday, and before the class started and the teacher started talking, this gal comes in, pulls out of her backpack a little Ziploc container with some peanut butter and apple slices in it and starts eating, and nobody's fazed by this at all. This teacher in high school allows them to have food and drink in their class. They don't have their class isn't over till way late, and so these kiddos have been going too long in the morning, and they're starved by the time they get to her class. So good for her that she even just kind of allows that kind of freedom. This was not disruptive to this class. She got her snack out, she ate it, she put it away. It was not a big deal. And so I'm going to send you a thing called Back to School Tips from the Experts from newswise.com, and that has some really fun. They talk about think of finger foods that are nutrient dense, fast to eat, and fun. And I think that's a great way to frame it, because whether you're eating in class, if that's allowed, or you're eating in the cafeteria, we all know the cafeteria is quite an interesting experience. Anything we can do to get in, get out, get fed quickly is a good call. So, and then our breath activities, blowing games. We have some. I'll send you some other web links talking about creativity and stress and going back to school, really allowing kids time to decompress and giving them away time. That I think we have to fill the day because we have so much we want to get done, but we need to build those decompression times in there. Our kids need it. We need it personally, just that we're adults and we can manage our schedule and take those breaks a little easier. There's a kind of a nice other little website post from an OT called Bonnie Hacker. She talks about 8 fun oral motor activities you can do to improve self-regulation. Not all of those are going to be good for the class, but take a look at it and we'll send you the link on it there. Our singing and humming games, and then one of my personal favorites is the Camelback bottles, because you have the bite and suck that comes into play there. I'll send you a list. Kelly Baines is an OT who has put up a list of what she calls sensory school supplies that you can take a look at, and she really talks about involving the kids in the choices of those supplies that they're buying. So that's really fun. In the movement category, I know we talk backpacks a lot, but our AOTA has done some beautiful guidelines on backpack awareness and making sure things are safe, how to pack your backpacks so that they're fitted right, what they should look like. And one of the big things that they were finding, unfortunately, as much as we're all about heavy work, we don't want to be heavy work to the point of back pain. So they have some nice guidelines talking about 10% of your body weight. The backpack shouldn't weigh too much more than that. So if we have a kiddo that's weighing 80 pounds, we shouldn't have a backpack over 8 pounds. And I know all of you can think of like 2 books that weigh more than 8 pounds together. So we want to kind of take a look at that. I'll send you those links because I think they're really valuable.
We have been working with a lot of teachers up in Canada in a school division there who are literally training all of their teachers in the ALERT program and how to use self-regulation in the classroom. And what I just want to continue to share with you is that some of the tools and the tricks and all of those kinds of things, the things for your mouth and the things for your hands, those are the things that tend to go by the wayside for them, even though they've been trained how to teach kids how to use them. What they always go back to is the heavy muscle work. The heavy muscle work and big body movement activities are always the biggest thing. So, again, if there's a way to implement them in the classroom, to talk about how kids can get movement during the day, but then for the parents who are out there, it also means, again, finding those intense periods of movement time that they can get before school and after school if they can't get it during the school day.
Absolutely, and it's fun to me to see that that's what's kind of proven out over time, that coming back to those things, it's nice to have fidgety stuff, it's nice to do all that stuff, but like you said, it can be hard to manage, it can be a pain, it can be misused and abused, so sticking with the heavy work, probably a good, solid, simple way to start, since that's what we're kind of talking about here. we have a lot of nice heavy work activity lists that will support kind of what Carla was saying in the Take 5 book. I know many of you have that, so go ahead and look that up in there. There's a nice article I'll send you the link to from the new where they talked about a researcher, Megan McClelland, who does a lot of research in early childhood development at Oregon State University, and they talk about playing games that build self-regulation skills, and I really like this. This is a nice combo of movement and those executive function kinds of skills, so games where you have to stop, think, and act. And ironically, our song that led us into our talk today of Stop, Think, What's My Plan, that was made by George up in Canada, a wonderful school psychologist. So things like red light, green light, things like Simon Says, just dancing and say stop. Hide and seek, which would probably be a little easier at home versus school, but those kinds of things where we're building in our muscle work, but we're also going ahead and getting to have to do the thinking part. So that's really nice. And I'll send you a couple of links for some things that way. In the touch category, Carla, start us off.
Well, a lot of times, especially in the elementary school, the secondary school transitions just help getting kids through the school day. There's so many things you can plug into transitions, and just the fact that they're getting to go to a different class every hour to 2 hours makes a big difference.
Yeah, that is a huge difference.
So they get to do their weighted transition with their backpacks and go into their locker.
So
but the younger kids sometimes have a harder time with those transitions. And in the touch category, doing something with weight, one of the things they came up with, again, in the school division in Canada, was filling 2-liter soda bottles with water. And the little girls like to dress them up and put sparkly water in them and call them their bottle babies. And the little guys like to get the green bottles and call them their dino eggs. And they just carried them with them everywhere they went. They set them on their lap when they were working at their desk. They carried them to the circle area. If they were going somewhere down the hallway, they could carry their bottle babies. Their hands were to themselves. They were getting the heavy work. And it was a great hand tool for them to use to get heavy work during transitions.
I just thought that was so sweet for our younger, our preschoolers and our early elementary, and it wasn't just our kiddos with special needs. Again, this is what we do in kindergarten or first grade or whatever, which is just great. So having fun with our strategies again, rather than, oh my gosh, we must do this, we must do that. I'm going to include a couple of links to Lindsay Beal's website and some handouts that she has. She's an occupational therapist and has written a book, Raising a Sensory Smart Child. She talks about some going back to school with some sensory smart things. And one of the fun things and one of the kicks that I got out of when I was looking at this is she has a quote in there about having your kids really work on selecting clothes. I know we want to dress our kids up and show off their wonderful fashion at school, but we all know this, that they can have sensitivities, and what we don't want, this is a quote from her, you don't want your child to be distressed by the sensation of new underpants when they're meeting their new classmates, and I think we can all relate to that, so we'll go for some function and comfort over fashion in that thing. In the local elementary school in my area here, all the first grade teachers have what they call finger weaving. It is always in the desk of every first grader, and when you don't know what to do or you're done your assignment, you do your finger weaving. Pull it out, work on it, and then, of course, everyone in your family gets a finger weaving gift for Christmas, because by that time they have made multiple different wonderful things. And it's not a complicated thing. There's all kinds of websites about that. I didn't put a specific website in, but just look it up online. You'll find some really fun things. And then again, we have lots of nice touch category listings in the Take 5 book. I think the look category, I know we covered a lot of how teachers are really good at using lights, how we go ahead and even coloring pages. I know for a lot of the secondary kids, there are wonderful coloring pages that are adult things, whether they're geometric shapes, whether they're there's ones that look kind of like stained glass when you do them. I mean, they're really cool, neat, age-appropriate things, and remembering how much some of our kids need those kinds of downtime. So just the coloring thing, I really find Lumen Large, and it's a great one for secondary school.
Also, just helping kids have a secure sense of where their things are going to be. If you have kids who are losing things all the time, who can't find their things, having it really clear where their supplies sit, where their backpack always is at home, that they have a checklist of things that they do in the morning to get their backpack ready. When they get to school, kids in elementary school may need dividers or things put in their desk that show exactly where things go. You know, I have a little friend who just talked about that she's just worried about, can she make her way to her locker? Can she manage the the
combination
lock,
on the
combination
lock.
lock, and what if she gets lost? You know, those are the things that our kids are thinking about when they go back to school, and this is really hard for them. So anything visually that you can do to set it up so it's real clear, so they know where stuff goes and where they get to keep things and put them away.
And we're going to go into the listen category. I notice that I'm getting close to my deadline here, so we're going to go ahead and talk a couple minutes over probably. If you have to get off, I totally understand. But in the listen category, I found kind of some fun free apps online that I thought would be really fun for our secondary students. So I don't know if my tech people can cue those up for me right now, but this is me. I recorded in this free app a couple of ideas of pieces that would be in a morning routine.
Get up, get dressed, brush teeth, eat breakfast, hack, 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 go to bus. Get up, get dressed, brush teeth, eat breakfast, hack, 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 go to bus. Get up, get dressed, brush teeth, eat breakfast, hack, 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 go to bus. Get up, get dressed, brush teeth.
That clip is a pretty high-level one, but I was really thinking of our secondary students. It's fast, they have to be verbal, that kind of thing, but you record yourself doing it. So it could be for our kids who really need to solidify those checklists in their head, and you can set the background music, you can play with these things.
Love it.
It was really fun. I had a good time with it, so if you didn't like it, too bad. I had a good time, so that's the way it goes. And then, of course, our alert program CDs and just quiet time, Carla. We had talked a lot about that, you and I. I'm going to go ahead and dive into our question, I think, from our parent, which was that the teacher doesn't believe or understand about sensory issues. And, oh, why? This has never come up for any of us ever before, huh, Carla?
Right.
But my first thing there is just we're just going to have to go slowly and find out what's meaningful to that teacher, because we often very much believe the things that are right for our bodies. So lots of the things that we have on the website, even just the What's All This Talk About Engines freebie handout, doing sensory motor preference checklist for you, for your child, and asking the teacher if they'd like to do it, looking at the intro book, inviting them to look at some of the freebies under the resource section on our website. And then for the super linear thinkers, I think looking at the research list that we have, there's really more and more good research that's showing not just that your kid needs support to pay attention, but all kids need support to pay attention. So this really is a school-wide issue, and lots more folks, I think, are looking at it. And we may want to have a chance to meet with the teacher and talk about information. But it really is a paradigm shift. We don't want to hurt anybody because they don't believe the same thing we do, but we do want to say this is information that's out there. It does show that it helps and supports our kids, so how can we work together, on getting that done? Did you have anything else you wanted to add on that one, Carla?
No, I just think the transition to school is just, we have a friend, Marcy Laurel, who talks a lot about how the big transition to school is about maintaining relationships, and sometimes that means spending a lot more time creating the relationship so that you do have an open way to chat with each other about what your child might need to make that transition into school. And for some of you, you may find you have the same transition when you go back after the Christmas holidays or after spring break. So being able to have those conversations and maintain that relationship so you can turn it into a conversation will just be an important thing to think about.
And well said. And I think it's important to acknowledge this feels like a big topic because it is. For lots of our families, for lots of our kids. We want the best positive experience for all the people involved, though, not just the child. We want all the kids in the class to be able to be supported. We want the teachers to be able to be supported. So going into it with our right attitude is going to help. I know some days that may not feel like it helps, but maybe that's the only thing we can control there. So we'll do that whole keeping it simple, making sure that we do the work to set children up for success. It can feel like so much work each year for our families to dive in and to start to do this process and spend the time. But I did just a quick calculation this morning when I was thinking about the call, and if you spend 6 hours a day at school for 180 days, and different schools are different of how many days you have to do, different state laws, that kind of thing, it's 1,080 hours. So having a bad year at school is really not a good plan. If we spend a lot of hours preparing and can make some of those 1,080 hours a whole lot better, I know that we can all figure that that's probably time well spent. And then one of the things that Carla had said, shared with me too, when we were talking about it, is it's definitely time well spent whenever we're working toward independence for our kids. That's a huge lift for all of us. Anything that we can take off our checklist and have our kids do and do well and do for themselves sure is a good boost. So I'm going to include a little common sense disclaimer. I often have taken the time to read it off to you or share it with you. I'll include it on your resource handout this time to remember to not do anything you're not comfortable with. Get help, get support if you need it, those kinds of things. And then, so that kind of winds us up. We went about 3 or 4 minutes over. I hope that didn't make it hard on anybody. Thanks a lot for joining us on this one, and we'll play a little song out and hang up when you like. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.